Okay, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Sabrina Kofer, and on behalf of Choice and ACRL, I'd like to welcome you to today's program, Humanities Education and Student Career Readiness, which is sponsored by Gale, part of Cengage Group. This session is one in a series of sponsored webinars from Choice and ACRL that addresses new ideas and developments of interest to the academic library community. I'll just put a couple links in the chat where you can register for upcoming webinars and watch previous webinar recordings. Before we get started, I'd like to point out just a few features of the webinar software. All attendees who join the presentation are automatically muted and your cameras are off, so don't worry about generating any noise or feedback. We've got that taken care of for you. In the main area of the screen, you can follow along with the presentation materials. To adjust the size of the slides or video, you can use the divider in the middle of the screen to slide the sizes to your liking. We are using the Q&A feature today. Please use it to ask questions of our speakers or to share any comments. We'll answer as many questions as we have time for at the end of the presentation, so please do type your questions into the Q&A module as they occur to you. Also, there is closed captioning available for today's session. To toggle the automated captions on or off, please use the CC button on the bottom panel of your screen. Last, please note that we are recording today's program and everyone who registered should receive a follow-up email with a link to the archive version and where to access today's slides. And with that, we're ready to get started, so I will hand it over to Jared.
Thank you, Sabrina. And hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. I am Jared Wright. I'm Senior Marketing Manager at Gale, part of Cengage Group. And we've been excited to talk about this topic for a while. And I think the timing is right to discuss the humanities in higher education, and not just the ways in which the humanities are vital in our landscape, but how to help make this humanistic background even more relevant in today's digital workforce to the fulfillment of humanities graduates, to the benefit of employers, and the continued relevance of the humanities at the institution overall as a result. So I am joined today by Adrian Graham, E-Resources Librarian at Austin Community College, Michael Meth, Dean of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Library at San Jose State University, and Kaitlyn Tannis, History and Social Sciences Librarian at the University of Delaware. And today we're going to keep this very strategic and tactical so that you folks can come away with insights about what institutional support for career readiness in the humanities looks like now, perspectives on what students get out of a degree that focuses more on skill development, actions on the skills aligned with a humanities education that are most in demand in the workforce and how to impart them, and takeaways for the road ahead, including the need for librarians to collaborate further with faculty. So what are we looking at here? So with the humanities today, I don't need to tell you there are competing narratives, both externally and internally. The fact is, in the push from a few years ago at the federal level to greatly increase STEM graduates, this has had an undeniable impact on the humanities. Awarded humanities degrees fell while STEM degrees increased. And this has been attended by a perception that a humanities degree won't do much for you in the workforce, making you not unemployable, but without viable long-term earning potential. And so a little hard on campus for many institutions. Funding is being pulled from libraries and humanities departments in some cases. In other cases, humanities majors have been cut. Faculty are on the defensive. AI is making the research path complicated for students especially. But the interesting thing is, it's a brighter picture in the actual workforce in both compensation rates, which have a longer upward trajectory than STEM-focused roles, but eventually get quite close to matching them, and employment, where the data shows that humanities grads have the same unemployment rate as those with degrees as in other areas. But we're not here to talk about earnings. What we'd like to discuss today are qualitative approaches that the library can take around perception on the ground, on campus, of what's missing and what's happening to support career readiness and strategies to make it stronger. So to do this today, we're going to dig into skills to make sense of the word cloud you see here. and how to impart them. So first, to scaffold the issue, we at Gale recently conducted a survey of librarians and faculty, digging into their perceptions of the current focus on career readiness and how they feel we should tackle improving it. And so I'm going to summarize those survey results, and then we'll hear from our 3 librarian experts to talk to you about their experiences and strategies. So let's get right into it. The first thing off the bat is chalked up perhaps to a communication gap. Faculty perceive workforce readiness for humanities students to be a somewhat large to moderate problem, while to librarians, perhaps understandably, not as urgent. Overall, just shy of 2 in 5 respondents said this was a somewhat large to very large problem. Almost half said it was a moderate problem, while 1 in 5 felt it was not really an issue. So whether or not respondents themselves felt that it was a major issue, they all engaged with the questions that followed, namely, whether their institutions were focused on workforce readiness and how the public perceived challenges to making humanities students career ready. Institutions were reportedly moderately focused on the issue, though librarians were somewhat more insistent than faculty that the problem was being addressed at the institutional level. And as for the public, the model showed that a general perception was that humanities graduates lacked applicable skills. This is their chief concern about their being career ready. Lack of funding in humanities departments was also a hurdle, followed by non-optimal positioning within institutional marketing. So to us, this next discovery is more interesting than it might initially sound. 54% of survey respondents stated that imparting transferable skills should be the main focus on institutions wishing to address this problem. So here's the thing, this is more popular than the number 2 choice by a factor of 2 to 1, the number 2 choice being course assignments that engage with workforce-friendly skills. So there is alignment between what the public feels the humanities are missing in terms of career readiness and what librarians and faculty survey respondents say they'd like to focus on, transferable skills. And then we dive into what those skills should be. Number 1 was emphatically critical thinking, as well as problem solving and written and verbal communication, with over 95% listing this as very important or critically important. But closely following is data literacy and information literacy, tied both at 93% as critically important. Now, these 3 skills, data literacy, critical thinking, and information literacy, are our focus for getting to the root of helping humanities students contribute optimally to today's digital workforce and get the most out of it, thereby raising the profile of the humanities in higher education. So we've talked about, excuse me, let's move it on, thank you, what the public thinks should be addressed, and that librarians agree it needs to be transferable skill development first and foremost. And then we talked about what those skills should be. So now let's look at what survey respondents feel institutions are doing. Is their focus on transferable skills? And the answer is yes, to a decent degree. To the extent that institution is thinking about career readiness for humanities graduates, which is about half of them, they're the most locked into professional development, your internships and work experience, with transferable skills being a close second. So on this graph, the darker the blue, the deeper the focus on these issues. And transferable skills is at 49% focus or extremely focused. So what did respondents say institutions should be doing more of or less of? The answer is experiential learning opportunities and digital tools integration into course assignments that engage with workforce-ready skills. These are the most important. And a key takeaway in our data was that librarians put extra emphasis on providing teaching and learning tools as critical support strategies for institutions. So the data shows alignment between what librarians are doing now to help ensure workforce readiness and what they should ideally be doing. But where there's a slight increase in emphasis is on providing tools and research platforms. And this extends crucially to the matter of AI and why there's emphasis on data literacy. So we provided an open-ended question about AI in our survey, and respondents by and large saw it as essential that students are supported in understanding its limitations and its pitfalls and ethics. which means that literacy with AI-generated content is vital. And I'm sure that this is not a surprise to anybody, but this can be done by integrating digital tools into curriculum that capitalize on experiential learning opportunities. And now there's a through line here: libraries and faculty collaboration, workshops, events, training on and awareness of tools. These can be successful with collaboration. And that's kind of what I want to leave you with before we get to our expert finalists, emphasizing the importance of library faculty collaboration as the crucial way to impart these three key career readiness skills: critical thinking, data literacy, and information literacy. And good news, we have just released a free handbook that focuses, like today's session, on actionable strategies for making humanities students better prepared for the 21st century workforce by librarians and faculty. So please feel free to scan the QR code here, and we'll show it again at the end of the session. And if you have any questions, feel free to place them into the chat or reach out to me directly over email. Thank you very much. And with that, I will hand it over to our first panelist, a librarian and faculty member at Austin Community College. And Adrian, the floor is yours.
Hey, everybody. I'm so excited to talk to you about this subject today. I'm Adrian Graham. I'm the e-resources librarian at ACC, and I've been in that role for over a decade. So enough to see an ILS migration, an authentication migration from Easy Proxy to Open Athens, all of those things that people in similar roles see. I also manage the kind of the big picture view of our collection. I advise our resource management team and administration on subscriptions we should undertake. I run database trials, I negotiate pricing, and like many folks, I'm probably the first stop for why is this link broken. But I'm also the subject librarian for 4 subject areas, and that comes into play today. I am the subject librarian for visual communication, engineering technology, advanced manufacturing, and architectural and engineering computer aided design. And let's get to it. So ACC, we're the home of the river bats. ACC service area encompasses roughly 7,000 square miles. We're also the 6th largest community college in the nation. And as a community college, we provide open door, open enrollment, access to Central Texans looking to earn a degree or learn a marketable skill or advance their career. We were founded in 1973. And one of the things we're most excited about is that we have a new chancellor who's instituted a pilot program for free tuition for graduating high school students and GED completers. And that's something very exciting for us. As I mentioned, we're a big institution. We're geographically large and have strong enrollment. But as a community college, student career readiness and transferable skills to the workplace are baked into almost everything that we do. And at ACC, that's been a strong driver of our commitment to an online collection, especially as a commuter school. We don't have dorms. And the fact that so many of our students are juggling work, home, childcare responsibilities, you name it. Meeting our students where they are is very important to us. And at ACC, librarians are faculty members. So we love partnering with classroom faculty on instruction and providing tools and resources to further students' research skills. And this is where this topic really comes into play for me. A few years ago, I was invited to teach a class by one of our classroom faculty champions, and I was immediately struck by the tone and the tenor of the class. And that class was Humanities 1301, The Great Questions. I walked in and the students were talking, they were plugged in, they were interested in their research. And I started to really look forward to these classes every semester. And as I worked with the faculty in these classes, I learned that they were structured around 3 tenets. And those are to speak clearly, so speaking to our topic of communication, to read carefully, which ties into problem solving and data literacy, and to reason effectively, that critical thinking that we're always striving for. The department's exit polling for this class even bears this out. 64% of students said it was the best class they had ever taken at ACC. 74% said they had clearer writing, 79% said better communication, and 80% had a better understanding of content overall. And something that the library has traditionally done is we often pair with integrated reading and writing strategies course. And those students need a little additional assistance to succeed in college level coursework. And some of those are paired with 1301. So there are a lot of ways that we tie into this course. So what are these students doing and what are we doing to help them research? The assignments are twofold. We have essays and presentations, but those presentations, especially when I visited the classes, were where I saw that communication, the data literacy, and the critical thinking come together. So here's some deliverables I created for these classes. We're a LibGuide institution, and I typically create a class guide for use during our session that they can use then and then also revisit after class. And speaking of AI, I've recently gotten into Gamma 2 as a slide deck for some visuals during the brief lecture portion before we dive into the hands-on activities. Here's a LibGuide screenshot. I like to grab some images from our online collections of the topics the students are researching and then link them back to high-quality articles in our databases on the subject. And here's a slide from a Gamma presentation. And in it, I try to talk about communication in almost a rhetorical fashion before we delve into how to find those quality images and supporting evidence. And when we talk about the credibility of sources, here's where we can bring in those critical thinking tools by helping students just delve deeper into that thing in front of them by looking at these metrics. And then I direct students to specific resources and they think, pair, share via Google Docs and report to the class their impressions of a resource. I also ask that they find at least one result that they believe will work for their upcoming assignment and upload it to their Drive or email it or print it. Because these are presentations, some of our data-heavy databases visuals work really well with the resources. And coming back to the student experience in these courses, one of the things I keep seeing as a librarian is this discussion model and core text course fostered students who are genuinely interested in the class. And there's something about the human experience at its core, which is curiosity about what makes life meaningful across cultures that I think all students, community college or four-year, respond to. And that melded that interest into that real-world application of transferable skills in those key areas. Thank you for your attention. And now I'm going to hand it off to Michael.
Thanks, Adrian. And let me just get the advance button going. There we go. Sorry, there's a slight delay. All right, there we are. Well, hello, everyone. My name is Michael Meth. I'm the Dean of the San Jose State University King Library. I'm also the Interim Dean of the College of Information, Data, and Society. And I'm going to be sharing with you a little bit about some of the work that we do at San Jose State. And I want to refer back to, you'll hear me, Humanities Education and Student Career Readiness in this conversation a little bit. So just to set some context, San Jose State University is part of the 23 campus CSU system. And we are the public university in Silicon Valley. And I think that's very important for a number of reasons, because on the one hand, folks think of Silicon Valley as the tech area where all, the innovations that so many of us use on our phones, on our computers, etc. And our president does describe Silicon Valley and the university as the epicenter of the future. But it's also worth noting that our campus has a very large intake of students. And with that, we actually put folks into careers all throughout Silicon Valley in government and non-for-profits and all the different industry and environments that exist. We are also recognized as a minority serving institution, which with HSI and NAPISI status. We were most recently recognized for our research activity with an R2 status. And that is also something that we're very proud of, and it's changing things a little bit. And as I mentioned, we are a large campus with over 37,000 students coming in this year, as well as over 250,000 alumni. So with that, again, we have a very broad reach that is much more than just tech. Now, I also want to share with you that SJSU has recently been recognized in a couple of national surveys. The first one is that we were ranked #1 as the most transformative university. We were also ranked the #4 public university in the nation by Wall Street Journal and 16 across all universities. And the reason why I want to highlight these rankings is because it shows how we are very student outcome focused. These surveys are much more related to students' attainment during the education and after graduation than some of the ones that are purely based on research output of the faculty. Just a little bit more context about our SJSU library. Some of you might have heard about it. You can see a picture on the top left that we have stylized of what our library looks like. But it's a very large building, 475,000 square feet across 9 floors, over 3,500 seats. And with that, during the last academic year, we had over 1.3 million in-person visits and 2.8 million plus visitors to our website. So we are a very active library. And I think the other thing that many of you might know about our library is that SJSU King Library is also the main branch of the San Jose Public Library. And so with that, we have a much broader responsibility than I think you find in many other libraries. More than that, also, we do believe and subscribe to the libraries are for everyone mantra that has been driving some of our work. And so with that, I want to then dive now into student career readiness. So this webinar is called Humanities Education and Student Career Readiness. And I think one of the questions that I've been grappling with as a librarian and then as a library dean now and all the positions in between is trying to figure out how do libraries contribute to student success? How do we do it through so many of the dimensions of our work? I've also been trying to figure out a little bit and see how we can map our library's contribution to how students' needs change as they go through their own academic journey. If you think as somebody coming in out of high school or as a transfer student from a college, they may not exactly know what careers they want or how they want to discover and learn. They might discover themselves along the way. Whereas, as they get towards the later stages of their career, they want to be more career ready. So how do we support that? And then in all of that, the question is not just how do we contribute and how do we adapt to the students' needs, but also the question that arises to me is how do we go from here and measure what the library actually contributes to student success? So here we go. Let me start with our Digital Humanities Center. I think as we were talking about students and graduates in the humanities, this is the most obvious connection. Our Digital Humanities Center opened last year in 2024, and previously it was a virtual service that was running throughout the library, but we actually opened a physical location. And that center was opened in collaboration with the San Jose Public Library and also our College of Humanities and Arts. And that is really important because it allows us then to really spread the programming of what happens in the center much more broadly. And so what we're trying to do is then through that center explain to students and educate them on, sorry, the slides are a little delayed in the way they're showing up, through a whole broader range of workshops and skill series. So the workshops are intended often to bridge the gap between tech and humanities. And again, because libraries are for everyone, the library is the place where anybody in the university can come and participate. So as you can see, we're hosting today, this is actually a current snapshot of what's going on this week. The online student research conference for the School of Information in the College of Information Data and Society. We are hosting skills-based workshops on Adobe tools, and I will talk a little bit more about that. We're also hosting later this week World Information Architecture Day, and if you're interested, that is available to all for registration. Then we're hosting Google Docs workshops. And in the bottom right, you can see that also here are some other workshops where we're really trying to delve into some of what Jared talked about earlier in the survey findings. We're really trying to get to digital and data literacy, but also critical thinking skills. And our goal is that with all of these workshops, students get hand-on experiences. With those hands-on experiences, they then develop transferable skills that they can use in the future as they go through their careers. No talk in this environment currently would be complete if we didn't also talk about artificial intelligence. And so I want to share with you a couple of things that are going on, because again, as we're thinking about workforce preparation and the role the library can play, it is important to think about how can we contribute to that. SJSU has a very strong and explicit focus on AI. And to that end, the library actually built the first website at SJSU that captures what is going on campus. And if you were to go to our website, you can get information on what you would expect to find as a faculty member with regards to teaching with AI, with regards to research opportunities. You'll also find information for students about the kind of courses and workshops they can participate in. And also for anybody who's not part of SJSU, they can get a sense of what activities we have going on. Furthermore, we were very fortunate to hire our first AI librarian. José Rodriguez started about a month ago now. And José has been an incredible contributor already. And her work is really allowing us to link up what we do in the library, to ask the complicated questions, to actually work on the digital and data literacy questions that were highlighted in the report earlier, and also link it up specifically with AI and the different tools that are available. And then along the way, we also developed the KingBot GPT tool. That is our own attempt at developing a chatbot to work alongside with our librarians and also as a self-service tool to our community of scholars. The CSU, then, the California State University system, has also a very large focus on AI. And I'm just going to point you to this website where you can see some of the initiatives that are being sponsored through the Chancellor's Office. And I want to also point you to the CSU AI Workforce Acceleration Board. This was announced about 3 weeks ago. And on there, we have a great number of the big tech companies that you would expect as members of this board. And along with that announcement was a further announcement that was made, which is that all of the CSU has access now to chatgpt.edu. And that is a very big development because we are now able, through the workshops that we're hosting, to give everybody access to the ChatGPT tool. They can, of course, also look at Gemini or the Anthropic tools or any other company's tools to really explore with them how these tools can be used. And also to see notice the differences between them in their daily applications. A lot of the work that we do is driven by partnerships, and we couldn't do it without partners. So I just want to highlight a few of our partners here. The first partnership that I want to highlight is the colleges, departments, and schools. Libraries are wonderful places that draw a lot of folks in. I shared with you some of our traffic numbers earlier. But our programming becomes so much stronger when it's integrated into the curriculum, when it's integrated into the workshops. And that's what we've been doing. So I mentioned the Digital Humanities Center is a collaboration with the College of Humanities and Arts, but our College of Social Sciences also utilizes it, as does the College of Business. And then in the colleges, of course, we have the departments and schools that come. We also partner with other campus groups like the Career Center. I think the connection there to job and workforce readiness is pretty obvious. We also partner with our Center for Faculty Excellence and Teaching Innovation. And Confetti is a really important part for us, reaching faculty across the disciplines, and to also explore how we can support their work as teachers and instructors and researchers, and how that then translates to the student experience in the classroom. We also partner with our associated students, that's our student government, as well as the registered student organizations, to host workshops. And again, we find that is a really impactful tool because what these student organizations do is they work across the disciplines. So not only do we get humanities students in, but we do get them from the other colleges as well. And then you have this cross-pollination of ideas and thoughts that happens. So for example, we have the virtual reality club coming. We have a responsible computing club. Those are all groups that are working with us. And then we have corporate and non-for-profit partners that are really important in our work as well. I mentioned earlier in the workshop series that Adobe is a tool that we are using and teaching quite a bit on. NVIDIA is another partner. And that's really important for us. And also, I would encourage any of you to think about how can you leverage these tools, but also the partnerships with these corporates. In our case, we are very fortunate. Adobe actually funds an instructional designer in the library. And so that gives us another opportunity to host a workshop series with the Career Center and also directly through the library to further increase job readiness. And then non-for-profits, of course, are a lot of community organizations that we partner with. Finally, I just want to mention also funding agencies are also important partners because often, as we all know, funding is tight and we are resource constrained. And so getting partnerships either with IMLS or NEH or other funding agencies can be a big boon to us and really enable and accelerate the work that we're doing. The Digital Humanities Center, just to go back to that as an example, is funded through, partially funded through a grant from the National Endowment for the Humanities. All right. I'm almost at the end, so let me just wrap up here, almost there. Student employment, we're talking about career readiness. And I think the one thing that we should never forget is in our library world is, sorry, this again, the slides are jumping around. There we go. The employment that we offer to our students. And we tried to capture this in this annual report spread that we just posted. So this is literally a screenshot of the spread for the 23-24 annual report for the King Library. And we tried to highlight, as you can see in the heading, the different jobs that our student assistants go on to once they graduate. And I want to point out that, not only do they recommend working at the SJSU library, which is that yellow box there in the top, but also the hours of employment that we try to highlight on the left. And when you think about the numbers that we produce here, when we really start thinking about how student employment leads to career readiness, there are phenomenal opportunities to create these high impact practices that lead to the transferable skills, the digital and data literacy, the critical thinking that was mentioned earlier. And examples of the jobs opportunities that we offer include fellowships in the Digital Humanities Center. We have a library research scholars program. We have students working directly with our AI librarian and other faculty and staff. They work on our marketing team. They support our CERC desk and ILL, and. I mean, the list just goes on. And I want to emphasize that again, because there's just so much opportunity there to really think about what we're talking about in this workshop today. And quite frankly, also, hopefully teach students about future careers in librarianship or in libraries. And then finally, I want to come back to the slide that I put up earlier, which is how do libraries contribute to student success? How do we adapt? And how do we access and measure the library's contribution? I'm going to say I think the last part is probably the hardest. We can measure how often they show up, how much they participate, but really getting a good quantitative measure is really hard on the contribution. However, I do think libraries are phenomenal contributors to student success. And there are plenty of studies that show engagement with the library and time spent in the library supports student success and their attainment during their scholastic career and also post-graduation. And I think libraries do a fantastic job also typically by offering this broad spectrum and range of courses to address the changing needs of students throughout their academic journey and as they discover what they're trying to accomplish and what's there in front of them. So I want to close out with two quotes. One is that I put on the slide, which is nobody graduates from the library, but nobody graduates without the library. I don't know who to attribute it to, but we've been saying it in libraries for a very long time. But it kind of goes to the heart of what I've been trying to share, which is libraries are essential components to a student's success and getting them also workforce ready in the humanities or quite frankly beyond. And then the other one that I want to leave you with is something that our president at SJSU also frequently says, talent is universal, opportunity is not. And I think that's where I want to leave off. Libraries can harness and enhance and support with all the work that we do, the talent of our students to create opportunities that are just outstanding for them and lead them to success in their careers. So with that, thank you very much. And Kaitlyn, tag, you're it.
Thanks so much, Michael. I appreciate that, the passover. Hi, everyone. My name is Kaitlyn Tanis. I am the History and Social Sciences librarian at the University of Delaware Library, Museums, and Press. I will talk about my role specifically at the library in just a second, but I wanted to share a little bit of information about the University of Delaware. So we are an R1 institution in the Mid-Atlantic. So we have about 25,000 students that are on our campus, all the way up from undergrad to doctoral. We work with a variety of levels of students, but we also have a focus on our outside community in Delaware and Maryland, into Pennsylvania and New Jersey as well. So we do definitely serve larger than just our campus. As far as myself and my role at the University of Delaware, I've been here since 2019. So I arrived with one normal year before the pandemic hit. And I am your traditional subject librarian. So I work in the research and engagement department at UD. And I really am in charge of providing research support for my designated departments, as well as instruction consultative support. And I also am in charge of collection development for my areas. So in addition to history and some social sciences, I cover the departments of history, the political science and international relations department, museum studies, area studies, legal studies, the Center for Material Culture Studies, and I also am the coordinator for the Public Policy and Administration School. So I cover quite a lot of areas that are all kind of nestled within either the humanities or social sciences. So this talk in this webinar today with these panelists, these are all conversations that I've been kind of grappling with within my time here at UD. So let me focus on just two things that I wanted to talk about that I've been doing and thinking about a lot in my job to make sure that my students who I meet and speak with and teach every single day really do have those transferable skills for their future. So first I wanted to talk about my role as an instruction librarian and really talk about something that I know everyone who is here today is already thinking about and already doing within their own classrooms themselves and within the conversations that they have with their students. So when I started in 2019, I performed a very extensive curriculum mapping project. So I looked at all of my core department areas and I figured out what classes in each of my areas make the most sense for me to actually provide information literacy skills to. So what are kind of the natural touch points within different degrees that would make the most sense for a librarian to come in and provide some sort of research instruction. And so I identified a lot of the typical research methods classes and also the capstone classes. For graduate students, it usually happens within the very first mandatory 600 level class that all of them take. And so then from there, I really reached out and started having conversations with faculty. And oftentimes I encountered faculty just didn't quite understand what information literacy skills meant and really the important role that librarians play in making sure that students have those. And so this is how I approach all of my instruction classes, and what I've emphasized with my faculty and students over the years is that I really want to foster a type of environment where students are really curious about the information that they're consuming, but that they're also critical information consumers. So I emphasize the very core information literacy skills that I know all of us already talk about, both within my instruction sessions and with my individual consultations with students. And I really do want to be clear that I kind of hit students over the head with it. And I kind of emphasize that, yes, the information that I'm sharing with you today, having you ask curious questions, having you be critical and evaluating sources that you encounter is really important to the success that you have towards your degree here at the University of Delaware. But really overall, it's important for you in the long run to be engaged citizens of this world. And so the lessons and the skills that they are gaining now are really setting themselves up to, yes, be vital within their own careers and their career path later on, but really to be active people within our society. And some of the ways that I have done that is, of course, talking to students about lateral reading and information literacy skills, but I also started to invite some of my colleagues from the Special Collections Department into especially my history sessions so that students are working with digital primary sources, but also physical primary sources to, again, kind of emphasize that critical thinking, but also just to get them excited about consuming information, about asking questions in a way that maybe is a little bit more creative than they normally would, especially since so much of our world is physically on a screen. The second thing that I wanted to talk about today kind of started around the time of the pandemic for me. So in 2020, I became a member of the Research Data Steering Group, which is kind of a collaborative group that started first within the library, but then kind of branched really quite naturally across campus. So the core of the group is made up of traditional subject librarians who are in my department. And in the past, they really were primarily in the sciences. But in 2020, myself, as well as another social science librarian, decided to join the group to kind of think a little bit more critically about how we were talking about data on our campus. And so this group has really grown since 2020. So we have a metadata and cataloging librarian who serves on that group. We have since hired 2 data services librarians, so they serve as well in that group. We also have members from Central IT and members from our research office on campus. So it's a very collaborative group where we're really focused on trying to, number one, kind of grapple with the very complex landscape of understanding what about data literacy is happening on our campus, but also hope, providing services that actually map and teach about data literacy. And so really, I thought my role within that group is to really bulk up our emphasis and our resources related to teaching data literacy for the humanities. And so it's been a couple years kind of trying to figure out the landscape, providing individual consultations with students. And then last year in 2024, I began offering a data for the humanities workshop in collaboration with my coworker, who is a metadata and cataloging librarian. So really the goal of the workshop is to make participants feel comfortable interacting and using data. And then another key portion of this is to give them confidence to talk about data. As a fellow humanities undergrad, I definitely did not feel comfortable interacting with numbers and spreadsheets. It really was something that was very outside of my wheelhouse. And so really the goal of this workshop is to make sure that humanities students have the tools to communicate effectively about things that especially they're not necessarily as comfortable dealing with. We also give our participants a chance to look at kind of complex data sets that are humanities focused, and then they kind of manipulate and use different tools to kind of play around with data and see what they can produce with it and ask questions that they might be able to bring back and relate to their own research and projects. I also really kind of uptick the number of consultations that I've provided for the humanities folks. So I've met with people from art conservation, I've met with people from English, history, to really talk like kind of hands-on about their research topics, and also what they would like to do in relation to data. Primarily, this has been mainly at the graduate level. We don't have too many undergraduates who are interested in data literacy at the moment, but I'm hoping that will change with some of this emphasis on data for the humanities going forward. And then lastly, something that I'm thinking about for the future related to data literacy and the humanities is that I am hoping to create a toolkit that basically will just allow students to think a little bit more creatively and think through how to create a data set, what questions they should be asking before they start a project. Things that traditionally social sciences and science students are learning in the classroom because that's part of the worked-in curriculum, but isn't always happening within our humanities classroom. So this is kind of a best practices. What do you need to think about before you even start creating a data set or thinking of it as a portion of your dissertation perhaps, and what are best practices that you need to incorporate before you begin. And then of course the research data steering group and myself are really there for us to provide individual consultation services to help answer questions for students as they go. So I'm hoping this is published by fall of 2025. And I'm hopeful it will be helpful for students in the long run as they're kind of thinking about these transferable skills that they really will need in many workforces, but getting humanities students a little bit more comfortable with using and interacting with data on a day-to-day basis. So I'm going to put up my email. You are welcome to reach out to me if you have any particular questions, but now I'm going to hand it back over to you, Jared, for our Q&A.
Thank you so much, Kaitlyn. And thank you to Michael and Adrian, as well as to Joyce for hosting. So once again, I invite you to scan the QR code on your screen to download our new free guide called Transforming Humanities Education for Student Career Readiness. And so, yeah, if you found this session today useful, this is a data-backed handbook further detailing why those 3 skills, critical thinking, data literacy, and information literacy are crucial, and more methods for imparting them to humanities students. And now, if there are any questions for our panelists, we'll leave it open for the Q&A. I've seen a couple of trickle in so far.
Great. Yeah, thanks, Jared. And thanks, Kaitlyn, Michael, and Adrian. Looks like we have a few questions so far. So to our attendees, I encourage you to submit your questions. Okay, let's get started. It looks like we have a question that came in during Adrian's presentation that asked any suggestions for increasing critical thinking activities in asynchronous, all online, 8-week summer courses.
Thank you for that question. And yeah, that was super challenging for us. But one of the things that we really focused on during COVID times, and then we've also revised them since then, is we have, and I'll drop this in the chat, we have some award-winning online tutorials that we assign, and we see other faculty assigned that have quizzes built in. And so the faculty get a numerical grade with it. And that seems to be really helpful. Also, librarians, if it helps and at faculty request, we can record videos demonstrating research techniques and methods. And that seems to be helpful as well. But anything that faculty can come up with, we can work on together.
Okay, great, thank you. Okay, I have a question from Maureen for Kaitlyn. How did you gain faculty buy-in for your presence in the high impact classes?
That's a great question. And I will be frank, there is at least one faculty member every semester that does not want anything to do with me. So it's not like I have 100% buy-in with all of my faculty all the time, right? There's always an outlier. But the way that I framed it with my faculty who at least see value and in me coming into their classes is I actually frame it in what have you been really frustrated about with your students in semesters past? And usually it always has to do with either the quality of their sources, where have actually found their sources, a lack of scholarly or academic resources, and that they're just seeing like students going to Google or internet research. And so then I go, well, that's my job, is to teach students how to actually navigate our library databases and navigate our complex resources. It is a very complex research landscape, but my job is to help guide students through that process a little bit better. And so I equate it to a one-to-one. Your students are lacking skills here and I can make up for them. And so therefore, give me a shot of coming into a classroom and talking with your students about that. And after I've been invited, all faculty consistently have said they've seen an increase in the quality of students' work. So at least that's how I've found success in faculty buy-in. I think not having something that definitely equates to or kind of makes sense in faculty, in the heads of faculty, to say that they are, I've lost my train of thought. So kind of like guide students to a particular skill set. I find that their buy-in in terms of why I can provide a lot to offer to their students is really just focused on the skills that that the students need to actually finish and get to their final assignment in class.
Great, thank you. Michael and Adrian, anything to add there or? Okay, great. Okay, another question. Could do this one. We have a comment here. Really interesting presentations and wonderful to hear about these insightful and interesting initiatives from across very different institutions. I would love to hear about any examples of partnerships between the library and humanities departments that perhaps did not turn out as envisaged and what the lessons learned might be. And maybe Michael, we could start with you.
Sure. This call is being recorded, right? So I think that's a really interesting question. I would say that by and large, the partnerships work out fairly well. And the reason why they work out well is that we have the same interests and the same alignment. And, if there are challenges to arise, it is typically because there are conversations around expectations that should have happened that maybe are not have not necessarily been shared in the same way. Or I think sometimes the other reason why challenges arise is when funding mechanisms don't align. So that's really the main reasons why I would say they don't work out when we have tried. But aside from that, it goes back a little bit to the conversation I had about how do we measure success. While I would love every event to have 20, 30, 40 students from a department to show up, sometimes it just happens that we get 5 or 10. And did it work out as expected? No, but that is always an inflection point for us to kind of pause and think back. What could we have done different? Is it about the way the event or workshop was advertised? Was it the way it was designed? Did we have the right partners on this? So that's the kind of challenges that typically we try to get better at to make sure we have as broad a reach as possible. So hopefully that gives without being too specific, some insight. But by and large, like I said, we find that there is success in all the things that we do. It is just difficult to measure it. So.
Great, thank you. Kaitlyn and Adrian, any thoughts there?
I think that was a great answer. And to pivot also on what Kaitlyn was saying as well. I mean, sometimes it's just not a match, and that's okay. But there's going to be a match with somebody else, and we keep trying.
I'll just say, for us, a good example, we tried really hard to do a lot of hybrid workshops post-pandemic because we were like, oh, well, everyone's back on campus. So, naturally, students are going to want to show up in person. And like pretty consistently, no one ever came to us in person. And including the first data for the humanities workshop, we tried to do a hybrid session. And so I think part of adapting and especially adapting to the new types of students that we have on campus and their different learning styles is just, learning to be flexible and learning to say like, in person's just not really going to cut it for us anymore. It should be virtual, and that's okay. We don't really like it, but we have to go in this different direction.
Got it. Great. Okay. Let's see. We have a question from Nikki. What's an example of interdepartmental partnership with the humanities department, and what did it achieve? Just throw it out to anyone here.
Well, I'll just say, so we are in close collaboration with our College of Humanities and Arts. And I'm just thinking about a example. It feels almost a little bit like an interview. And this is not a critique of the question. It's just I'm trying to think, what is the story that would be helpful? Because I'll just phrase it a little bit differently. So from my perspective, there are conversations that happen between myself as the Dean of the Library and the Dean of the College of Humanities and Arts. And I would say that we kind of develop broad strategy for the ways that we want to collaborate together. And then there are associate deans who are also in regular contact, and they're a little bit more focused, I would say, on whereas we're very high level, they're more at the let's shape it into something more structured. And then we have our staff, which is the librarians who are at SJSU, also faculty, and the staff in the centers that then actually get down to, I would say like the brass tacks, so to speak, like they organize the events, they develop the curriculum. And then, that is usually done then in collaboration some way. And if we do it really well, then it ties in with what either students are interested in that is ahead of the curriculum, or it ties into the curricular needs that they have. And so I think that's really where we're trying to connect at that level. But what we're trying to do at the top level is make sure that the lines of communication are open, that, sometimes just the way we're structured, libraries, universities, colleges are very hierarchical, budgets are controlled at different levels. So we're trying to be really clear about that. And I would encourage you to take a look, for example, at our Digital Humanities Center workshop series. The College of Humanities and Arts is trying to do a human-centered AI project. They want to stand up a research center The College of Information Data and Society, of which I'm the interim dean, is developing a certificate on human-centered AI. We have an AI for Good initiative. And so what we're trying to do is bring all of that together to then inform the workshops that we're running. And the most recent one that we ran was on bias in AI. And it was really interesting because we encouraged our students to help us figure out a way that we can make that clear and visible to a number of participants in a room. And the students developed a input screen, basically, where you then have a couple of sliders, and that lets you set what's called, I believe, the temperature or something like that. I forget the exact phrase, but how specific and how wide the ranges can be. And it was fascinating because you asked some questions that are ambiguous about gender and the relationship between, a question was something about like the doctor called the nurse because they were late. And it said, who was late? And depending on how you change that, you would get a totally different answer. And the reason I'm pointing that out is these are the kind of workshops that we produce that then are in conjunction with the colleges to then get our students aware and ready for these kind of questions. So it doesn't matter if they're in the sciences, if they're in comp sci or comp engineering, or in the humanities, but bringing them together allows them to create better projects, better working groups, and also meet each other across the campus. So hopefully that's, again, I'm trying to get to some answers, but maybe this is helpful in this context.
Great, thank you. Okay, we have time for a couple more questions. There's one here from Joseph. One aspect of career readiness that I've heard and noticed is not knowing how to share their transferable skills on CVs, cover letters, or resumes. Have any of you or your libraries worked with your student success departments on resume building workshops and showing these skills on resumes? And again, I'll just open it up. Adrian, if you want to start.
I'll start. This is actually something we haven't done yet, but we have recognized as a need. Something that we're still trying to explore is programming and figuring out how to do that successfully across 11 campuses with no real central library situation. So, but this is one of the topics that we're looking at coordinating with our student success. So I'd be interested to hear panelists as well if you've done this.
So at the University of Delaware, we haven't done resume building workshops. I mean, I did share that at least in the data for the Humanities workshop, we do talk about how you communicate. And also one thing that I didn't mention is that we also emphasize how you talk to your faculty who might not necessarily see the same value in your data project as you do in relation to your dissertation. But one thing that we did implement, I think this is our second semester that we're doing it, is we have different digital badges. So they're kind of on a variety of different topics at the University of Delaware, like story building. We also have a data management digital badge. And so those digital badges, although not necessarily teaching students how to actually add that to their resume or talk about it in an interview, could be applied to their LinkedIn or could be applied to their resume to show that they're building those particular skills that could be applicable in a workforce.
I'll just quickly jump in to say that I love that question. And at different times in my career as a librarian, I've participated or tried to address this question. And I think the one thing that I would point out is that you don't have to necessarily work with a student success department, which I suspect is something that would be outside of the library, but you can work with your student supervisors to host discussions with the students and say to them, look, you can describe your role at the circ desk in very different ways. If you're just sitting there and sort of doing homework when nobody's there, that's one thing, but that doesn't sound very good to a potential employer. But if you're talking about the work and how you're creating an environment that is welcoming and you're contributing to the success of the institution, and if we can help translate sometimes this work that is not necessarily so obviously translatable, you have a lot of opportunity. And then also in other instances, I've facilitated groups to meet with each other. And we've done things like resume round robins and all that kind of stuff. And it helps students actually read other students' resumes and critique them. And so it builds their own awareness about how they present themselves. And the last thing that I would also offer is that as a librarian or an employee of a library staff, you can always offer students also basically an interview opportunities. So you can say, give me your resume, I will interview you, and we can talk about it, and you can provide feedback on that. And you can use that as an information literacy tool even. So just some ways that you might want to approach this if you're interested.
Great, thanks so much. Okay, looks like we're just at the end here, so I will wrap up and say thanks so much to Jared, Adrian, Michael, and Kaitlyn for taking the time to speak with us today. And thank you to our attendees for your questions and your comments. I'd like to remind our viewers that we did record today's program, so be on the lookout for a follow-up email from Joyce and ACRL with a link to the recording and where to access today's slides. Also, if you have a few minutes after the presentation to fill out a brief survey, we would really appreciate it. So thanks again to all of you out there for joining us. We hope you learned something new from the webinar and hope to see you again soon on another session.